Many would say, thankfully, Christopher Pyne and Malcolm Turnbull have left the Parliament, never to be heard from again. But they leave behind an appalling mess. Remember, no one in Canberra is prepared to properly fund dams, plural, so that we can harvest water. No one's prepared to build a coal-fired power station so that we can have the cheap energy to which we're entitled. Instead of being dearer than anywhere in the world, it should be cheaper. But we export coal so the rest of the world can have cheap electricity. And we head towards the status of cave dweller. So apparently, no money for this critical infrastructure. But we talk productivity. As I said before, imagine the nation's wealth if we returned to cheap energy and if we harvested our water, irrigated our glorious soils west of the Great Dividing Range, we could grow enough foodstuffs to feed Asia. That's what I call productivity and wealth. Instead, we're burdened with the Pyne and Turnbull legacy, a ludicrous submarine program. $50 billion B for billion. Forget it. That's if you're lucky. By the way, this is borrowed money. There's been no public accountability for the cost or the benefit. 50 billion is at the lower end. Some say the end cost could be 130 billion. This was to save 3 Liberal seats in South Australia and save Turnbull's Prime Ministership. 40 billion a seat. And by the way, the first of them won't be delivered until the 2030s. It's 2019 now. A joint statement released at the time said this: the submarines will help protect Australia's security and prosperity for decades to come and also deepen the defence relationship between Australia and France. Will they? We've spoken before on this program to Gary Johnston. He's a highly successful businessman, the founder of the J-Car Group and the man behind a website called Submarines for Australia. He played a central role in the production of a report by the consulting firm Insight Economics. That report showed that the submarine program is our biggest ever defence acquisition project. It will, of course, cost, the report showed, far more than is necessary. And because the submarine program won't deliver the submarines until somewhere in the never-never, Turnbull and Pyne are gone, but the pork barrelling remains. We'll have a very serious capability gap of several years when Australia may have no operational submarines at all. What a legacy. Who's going to pick up the tab? Gary Johnston has called this a flawed process that resulted in the costliest and most risky acquisition approach possible over an unacceptable time frame. There was no competitive process between 2 or 3 contractors. We could have bought these things off the shelf from Germany or Japan or France 30% cheaper. But here's the rub. These things are nuclear powered, not diesel. French Barracuda submarines, none in operation anywhere in the world. And these will have to be retrofitted and redesigned with a diesel piston engine. And no one in the history of submarine construction has tried to convert a nuclear submarine to a diesel one. Well, Gary Johnston hasn't fallen off his chair, but he, like us, is a taxpayer. He must feel as if he wants to fall off the chair. He's right here beside me. Gary.
Good evening, Alan, and thank you for having me on your program. Good evening, Graham. The government doesn't seem to have enough money to drought-proof this country, but it's got plenty of money to squander on submarines at the most exorbitant price in history. I don't know whether you're aware, but the Naval Group has now decided to charge us or quote us $6 billion for the design of the submarine. The design.
It's B for billion.
Billion. Now, the Collins...
$6 billion for the design.
$6 billion for the design. Now, the Collins-class submarines were made in Australia, 6 of them, for about $6 billion. That's not just the design. That was making them as well. This is more expensive than an expensive French handbag, sort of. They're absolutely...
You have said in this report, when I saw that the government proposed to spend $50 billion on 12 new French submarines with only a design concept and no proper evaluation or competitive tender process, I thought enough is enough. I decided to commission a thorough investigation of the acquisition process for the FSM, that's Future Submarine, to see if there wasn't a better way forward with a lower cost and fewer risks. And you found a better way forward. Buy them from somewhere else off the shelf.
Correct. Absolutely correct. Defence have got themselves into a terrible muddle over this. They're just getting worse. They've just accepted this $6 billion quote to design them, and they haven't questioned it. You can get the back of an envelope and work out that they could employ 4,000 engineers at $300,000 a year for 4 years for that sort of money.
But where is
it costs you about $700 million to design a submarine, not $6 billion.
But there's no...
They're having a go at us. They're having a lend of us.
I mean, there's no competitive process here. Your report says you called it a flawed process that resulted in the costliest and most risky acquisition approach possible over an unacceptable time frame, and you quote, for political reasons stated that the submarines must all be built in Adelaide regardless of the cost.
Well, now that Christopher Pyne has gone, I guess the impetus to go to Adelaide is maybe not as great.
But have the contracts been signed?
Yes, it'll cost us about $430 million to break the contract. I think that's a bargain, frankly.
A bargain, absolutely.
Yeah.
It's $6 billion.
A bargain. The only public analysis, am I right in saying this? So this is all off the top of your head, off the back of an envelope. The only public analysis commissioned by the Department of Defence was by this US consultancy, RAND Group, and it found that building ships in Australia involved a cost premium of up to 30 or 40%. So to build them
more like 200%, really, but it depends on how you cost it. Yeah. I don't mind the idea in principle of building ships in Australia. The Anzac-class frigates were made in Williamtown, and they were on time and on budget. The Collins-class submarine, eventually, they got it sorted out. They got it sorted out. But this French idea is just insane.
Well, your report has said this. The report estimates a whole-of-life cost, that's the key here, including acquisition, sustainment and the life extension of the Collins-class at $180 billion.
Yeah, it'll be that, yeah.
Why, Graham, there's no debate, no discussion about any of this?
No, I haven't heard any of this.
Which is the reason we're doing it.
The big problem with the Westminster system is if when both sides, on opposite sides of Parliament, don't argue with each other, the Westminster system breaks down. Labor's gone doggo on this too. They're not criticising the government.
One of the problems for me on this, I can remember being part of decisions on defence acquisitions in Cabinet, and you're not expert. You're not an expert. You don't know anything about a submarine. What do I know? I wouldn't know one end from the other. Yep. And so some boffins come in from defence, and they just deluge you with figures and
they snow you.
And you're sitting there not having a clue.
No.
That's the truth. Now, it's an unhappy truth, but it's the truth.
Well,
so what happens is cabinets make decisions when they have no idea of what the basis of the decision was. And what we have to do is start to work out a much better way, because Cabinet is not the place to decide where to buy a submarine.
Yeah, there's too much money involved.
Just to interrupt you there, this is significant for our viewers. You say the report shows that there's a strong possibility that the first of these won't be operational until 2040, with the Collins class reaching the end of their lives in 2026 to 2033. This is a terrible situation.
It's 3 years ago that Turnbull made that announcement. Yeah. Nothing's happened except a bit of talk. Nothing. The French have said...
A lot of Turnbull's announcements came to nothing.
That's right. So the French said, give us $6 million and we'll design it. But they said it'll take us 4 years. So that's 7 years of not even cutting any steel to start making them. They take 2 to 3 years each to make. So it's going out to the late 2020s, 2030, and we'll have no submarines.
Right, well, let's take the next point, which is just laughable. These are French Barracuda submarines. Simple question, Gary. How many of them are currently in operation anywhere in the world?
Well, no diesel ones.
None.
None.
Right. And the first version's in a shipyard yet to be launched. Now, then we've got to convert them. We've ordered nuclear power, not diesel.
No, we've ordered diesel.
We've ordered diesel.
We've ordered diesel.
But the irony is that the ship, the boat that is to be designed around, the nuclear boat, has just been launched. It actually exists. The nuclear vessel. It's not a bad boat. It's not a bad submarine.
But these things have got to be retrofitted.
They've got to put a diesel in them, which is a joke.
Well, can't we have a nuclear-powered one? What's the great drama about having a nuclear-powered
Well, we need to grow up as a country to do that. Albo has just said that we're going to have retain our moratorium on nuclear power in Australia, which is a joke, because, frankly, he's way out of date.
That's your mate.
He's way out of date. He's thinking of these 200-hectare...
He is my mate.
The technology has moved on vastly.
It's a staggering thing.
Yeah, to small modular reactors.
Legislation which prevents the existence of nuclear power in this country.
That's right.
A law of the land says we can't have nuclear power.
That's right.
It's beyond belief, isn't
We've got this very skinny little electricity grid that runs right down the east coast of Australia with massive voltage drops across it, with small... I don't want to talk about modular reactors and nuclear power generation. That's for another night. I'd love to come and talk about that. But the fact is you can now buy nuclear power stations that will run, say, Gladstone, central Queensland, no power transmission, make it in the industrial estate outside of town.
But in France...
They come out of a box.
In France, I mean, France is as big as a pocket handkerchief, as you know, and local communities fight over having a nuclear power station.
That's right.
It's jobs, it's cheap electricity, it's safe and all the rest of it.
That's right.
And here we are in an antediluvian...
How long have they had it in France?
Yes,
They had it from after the Second World War.
Yeah.
Because they said, we got to stop the Germans from coming over our border again. How do we do that? We do it with atomic bombs. And that's how it all started.
Just let's sum this up, though. I mean, Graham, this is staggering. What Gary is saying is not one of these Barracuda submarines has ever been built. They don't exist. They're being designed as nuclear submarines and they've got to be converted to diesel. And Graham says, well, what's wrong with nuclear? Because the country's gone mad and we're going to convert them. But you're saying no one in the world has ever done that?
No, ever. We'd be far better off buying the French nuclear submarine.
Yeah,
it's ex-stock. It's off the shelf. It's off the shelf. A diesel submarine, to get to its area of operation above Indonesia, has to come from Stirling in Perth. It takes about a month to get there. It does 4 knots. We can walk at 4 knots. It'd take us a month to get there even if we walked it. A nuclear submarine can do 30 knots underwater to get on station. The only thing stopping a nuclear submarine staying on station is that it'll run out of food eventually.
But we're buying something...
Around the world, can I ask you, how many of these diesel ones are being built? I mean, does anyone...
never been built.
Us?
Nobody's building diesel submarines anymore.
We're buying...
We won't. Look, if ever we get them, we won't get the crew to run them because there'll be no crew of any sense would go on them. Because it'll be swarming with nuclear submarines by the time they're delivered.
We're buying something that has never been built. But you're saying the contracts have been signed. OK, well, can't someone persuade someone in Canberra to break the contract? At $400 million, it's cheap.
Do you know what we could do? We don't have to waste the $430 million.
No.
We'll say, look, we've changed our mind. It was a stupid idea. Let's order the French submarines. Can you give us the money we've given you now
Yes.
as a credit towards the nukes?
And we'll buy them.
Because the French are having trouble selling the nukes. And we get a credit.
Let's get ScoMo to a barbecue and the football cap on and we'll tell him. True.
That's exactly right. They would love to sell us a nuclear submarine, let me tell you. They would love it.
So we don't have a clue. This is the central point I suppose we're making tonight. We don't have the money, we say, for a coal-fired power station. We can't build the dams. There's no money for the kind of infrastructure that's immediately needed, even though interest rates are at about 1%. But we've got $180 billion minimum for a useless project about submarines.
Which we may never get those submarines. The other thing is that they insist, Defence insists that we use lead-acid technology for the electric propulsion. The only place you'll see a lead-acid battery in the 2030s will be in a museum.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because lithium-ion... They don't want your lithium-ion technology. They've specced out lithium-ion. They said, no, lead-acid will do us.
Well, let's just come back, Graham. You have the final say here because you already said it tonight. On the one hand, Cabinet have no knowledge of this stuff. They did no homework. The public, unfortunately, all they're doing is forking out the money, but they don't know. So at the end of the day, people feel impotent to get the right result.
Well, the right result will be decided by 2 or 3 bureaucrats in the Department of Defence. The trouble with that is it may not be the right result.
Okay.
Tony Abbott has said to me the Department of Defence can be very, very stubborn. He said that too.
No doubt about that. No doubt about that. Well, there we are.
They don't want to lose face.
Well, OK, so that's a matter that we will take up, I can assure you. And I think the key point that Gary has made here tonight, Gary Johnston, who is an expert in this stuff and he's done a hell of a lot of work, the key point is break the contract. And if need be, if we have to pay out $400 million to break the contract, it's money that will actually be saved in terms of what we need to do.
That's cheap.
That's cheap. It's going to be the cheapest option.
Gary, thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you for your time.